Welcome back to the Law of Relevancy podcast. Today, my guest is the CEO of Alltrust Insurance, Tim Love.
It's good to be here, Cord.
Thank you so much for coming in. Now,
it's my pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you're one of the rare breed. You're actually from here.
Yes, Clearwater High School. I'm a product of the Pinellas County public school system, for better or for worse.
Now, we're a thriving community, but we used to be more consolidated in the types of things that happened here in the Tampa Bay area, right?
I think so. I think we've gotten more and more fragmented. I mean, I think within counties we've gotten fragmented, to be perfectly honest with you.
And so when you were growing up, I mean, I guess tourism was by far the biggest industry.
Yeah, I'm a product of Clearwater High School in Clearwater, Florida, and tourism was
tornadoes?
Everything. Yeah, how about that? I won't say what class.
There you go.
Let's just put it this way: it started with an 8 and it ended with a 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was certainly a different town back then. I mean, Clearwater was a sleepy beach town, that was made up of mom and pop restaurants and mom and pop motels. The Church of Scientology hadn't moved in yet, and you had a downtown business district.
What about that institution of Hooters?
Yes. I mean, right? Like, that's our claim to fame, right? Right. The beach and Hooters. And somehow they seem to go together pretty well. And I think both have been successful.
I wondered, yeah, it's kind of like now it's obvious where the idea came from.
Right.
Now that you mention it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We gotta be known for something.
Yeah. Well, Clearwater, I've always enjoyed visiting there. I remember when I grew up in Georgia. I went to school in Georgia, and then after I graduated college, I would spend a lot of time at the beaches around here, and during Memorial Day, like the long weekends, spring break. And so when I graduated, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that's to get a job somewhere around here because it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a hard place to be. It really is. I mean, it's almost that one of those scenarios where we've got all the things that a large city has, right? Mm-hmm. Museums, sports, the arts, and then yet we're surrounded by golf courses and beaches. I mean, you can't beat it. Where in Georgia did you go to school?
I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and then I went to Georgia Tech.
Oh, okay.
For
so
college.
I went to school about 12 miles from you.
Really? Which one?
Emory.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Right down the street. In fact, we had to adopt you guys for sports.
That's true. Yeah, well, we had to adopt you guys for dating people because we were about 9 to 1 guys to girls.
Right.
So
it's great school.
We definitely borrowed some of y'all's co-eds. So thank you. Well, anyhow, so you grew up here, and you are now the CEO of Alltrust Insurance. And now that's an agency that specializes in benefits.
Correct. Yeah, and this is our home. And I think you look at things differently when you run a business in your hometown, right? And it doesn't matter whether it's, whatever part of Tampa Bay. I think we, to a large extent, all identify as the Tampa Bay region. But I think you really look at the business differently. You're going to be here long term.
Right.
I call it the Publix effect. I don't want to ever walk around the corner in Publix and see somebody that I mistreated in a business dealing, and I got to run down out the store or to another aisle. And I think you also invest back in the business community in which you're going to live and work.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, and then we'll move on to the community portion. Human resource benefits, those types of insurance verticals, they are famously relationship built.
They are.
And it's so important to be able to provide very, very high levels of customer service. I mean, what percentage of your business would you say comes from referrals?
I would say it's north of 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's north of 50. It's clearly a relationship business, as you said, and it's multiple relationships, right? So our clients are customers, but to a large extent, their clients are employees.
Yeah, their relationships with their employees is their primary concern.
Correct. And we're seeing, if you look at the labor market right now, recruiting and retaining employees is absolutely essential. I think Florida's got a 2.9%, 3% unemployment rate. We've seen salaries go up kind of across the board in the last 24 months. We're seeing higher demands on things like remote work and virtual work. So helping those customers be able to recruit and retain what's probably their most important asset is really what all of this is about.
And obviously, when benefits are done right, that is what you're doing. You're building packages that incentivize people to stay where they're at. And
Absolutely.
Because a tenured employee can offer a lot more than somebody who's only been there for a year.
Yeah, and there's this institutional knowledge that walks out the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just do we have to replace that position and pay more. It's do we have to replace that position, then invest in training and getting people to assimilate to the culture. And you may not have, it could be 3-4 months before the person is even at the competency level. And in today's world where margins are compressed, you don't have the luxury of losing that time. So let's invest in what you currently have in terms of staff, and let's make sure that that's a livable number from a turnover perspective.
So what are some things that we're seeing in the marketplace? I mean, obviously, Florida has, it seems like millions of people are moving here, but tens of thousands of people here are moving to Florida all the time now.
Yeah.
It's really helped if you own a home or something.
Right.
Your real estate values have really benefited, but there's a lot of businesses moving here, right? And
there are.
I mean, we were even having the discussion about office space.
Right.
Like you would think because of COVID and remote work that office space is available. And you even shared with me, your own personal experience of going through that and trying to locate a good place to do, have your office that, is available. But there's a lot of businesses moving here. So it's really, really tough. What are some of the things that you're seeing in 2023 that are a big deal for what should CEOs and presidents and people who are making those hiring decisions, what kind of programs should they put together? Or are you seeing, is there any innovation happening out there? Break it down for us.
Yeah, I think that, insurance is just, famous for not having innovation. And, I think that's really hurt the industry, to be perfectly honest with you. So what we're seeing is, employers are putting together plans that encompass the whole person. And it's way overdue. They're looking at mental health programs. They're looking at implementing mindfulness and wellness programs.
Yeah.
We're starting to see financial literacy become part of employee benefit plans. The studies out there today, and
that's a good point. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt,
no,
but that is
please.
actually a really good point because I've myself experienced turnover because someone who, in my opinion, is living life better than I lived at their age.
Right.
In terms of what they're doing, more secure, making better choices, then all of a sudden they'll make some kind of a financial decision. And, who am I to judge? But, as someone who makes this, do you really need a 5 Series BMW right now? At this point in your life, next thing you know, I've got turnover because they can't afford their car payment because of a financial decision they might make.
It's true, and we're seeing that, and there's also the loss of productivity, right? So if you're stressed about your bills, you wake up with that, you go to bed with it, and you're probably not totally present in your workday. And then you also see people, whether it's a car, home ownership. If you look at what's happened here in the last 2 years on home prices.
Someone not being able to navigate, being swindled on some kind of mortgage or something that was a balloon.
Yeah, or just not knowing what they're getting into and that budgeting process, right?
Yeah.
So financial literacy.
Or even the yard work.
Yeah, or the fact the roof is going to eventually need to be replaced, and you got to budget for that over the course of a 10-year period. But we're seeing a lot of that come into play. I think when you start thinking about things that we've talked about forever, like work-life balance, candidly, I don't know a lot of super successful people that have balance in their life. But what you can do is
at least financially successful, right?
Right. Yeah. That's a great clarification. We are starting to see things like, PTO becoming one of the top priorities for people when they're changing jobs. And, there's studies that come out every year. And historically, you would sit back and say, okay, people are changing jobs, and it's salary, it's medical plan, it's pension, 401k, retirement. that's kind of been turned upside down now. And I think that's one of the areas that COVID really changed was people's priorities. I mean, let's face it, that was a traumatic experience, and people don't come out of trauma the same way they went into it.
Sure.
So, we're looking at studies that show PTO either first or second or third, even behind financial compensation. So we're really trying to stay on top of that. And I think employers, they've got to balance the bottom line. They've got to balance the cost. But the ones that really fit our model is they look at it as an investment, not an expense. So, it's kind of like the old comment about human resources versus human capital. A resource is, a lot of companies change their name. Resource is something you burn, and capital is something you invest, right? And so I think people are starting to understand that is an investment and not just an expense. And there's a lot of things that you can do, to entice employees. And, we're sitting in this pretty beautiful space right here. I mean, that comes into play. You'd be surprised how often that does come into play. Is, the office, you read it and it's like the office is cool. It's a great space to work in.
I was actually talking to Elizabeth Dvorak about that. And, that's a big part of what they do at Workscapes.
Right.
Is, you go into their showroom and you go into a place where it's been decorated or designed in a way to actually inspire.
Right.
And you can increase productivity and creativity easily.
You can. I mean, just walk out here and you've got people working next to each other.
Yeah.
There's no barriers to communication.
Yeah, if you think about the benefits you might get out of a more comfortable chair, that Aeron chair all of a sudden now becomes really affordable because
Right.
if it can lead to, decisions that become multitudes of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, like now you've actually done something very beneficial for yourself.
Right. And I think that people are starting to understand too. Business is done at the speed of the internet nowadays. And so breaking down internal infrastructure to allow people to communicate quickly, be nimble, be super responsive to customers or super responsive to shifts in the market. If you're still in kind of that old static, hierarchical system, I think that, it's probably pretty hard to compete in today's world.
Well, you mentioned insurance has notoriously been very slow to adapt.
Right.
I mean, a lot of that, I would assume, has to do with there's highly regulated as well.
Correct.
So when you're waiting on legislation to actually help turn the plane or the boat or whatever the
Right.
metaphor is, it can be very slow. I mean, we're seeing things that are happening now, like you said, the speed of the internet. I mean, even with my goodness, with ChatGPT, what's happening with that thing, it's just made the internet even faster.
Yeah, that's kind of freaking me out. I got to be honest. Yeah, I think you're right, and I think what's happening is we're finding non-insurance products that don't have to go through the regulatory process. Most of those products that we see come through the regulatory process, they're out of date by the time they're even approved, and the speed to market is terrible. So we're seeing people use those other benefits to, augment regulated products. Our philosophy is we provide a suite of services to you. We just happen to get paid through insurance.
Yeah.
We'll work with you on your technology platforms. We'll work with you on your wellness programs, your overall HR strategy. We have HR consultants. So if we waited on insurance,
It's a commodity.
It's become that way. Yeah, it's really.
I mean,
become that
I mean,
way.
I don't want to offend, but yeah,
No,
in
no.
some ways, it is very, very much a commodity.
It is, and so as that distribution arm,
Right.
we have to find a way to decommoditize ourselves.
Right.
If we're just transacting insurance, 80% of that within 5 years will be bought online. It's we saw companies like Esurance and some of these come out. They failed miserably.
Right.
It was just a technology play. There was no value there. But we're certainly going to have to live in that world going forward. I don't think there's any doubt that technology will disrupt our business.
Well, I think you're hitting on some very important value adds to the way that you do business and the way that you're thinking about interacting with your customers and their employees. I mean, one of the things that we do that, when I think about the lost time, it really doesn't cost me anything. But one of the things we do is every month, like we'll take like a half day and go volunteer somewhere.
That's huge.
Like you have the ability to, because a lot of people want to work in a place that they know is like, doing something good for the world, right?
Right.
And so we let the team pick, like, do they want to go to Humane Society? Do they want to go to Ronald McDonald House? Like what do they want to do?
That's awesome.
To go volunteer. Thank you. And thinking about it from like a bean counter perspective, like it's really a positive, to be honest with you, because
100%.
we can retain and it actually does. It makes us feel good as an organization.
There's a lot to be said for that, and actually, most employees are looking for that, right? My generation was, how fast can I get up the corporate ladder? I think, the younger generations get a lot of heat they don't deserve, because I think the way they're looking at the world is actually healthier, and they're looking at it saying, I want to be part of an organization that's a good community citizen.
Yeah.
And things that we did just this past year. We've always had 2 days, just similar to y'all. Not as frequent, but 2 days a year, we go to a charity and we work there. And this year we implemented, in addition to our normal PTO and holidays, we have a volunteer day. So an employee can pick any group that they want to volunteer with, take that day off paid. And, to me, it's kind of funny. I've been around long enough to where corporations were doing like these retreats, right? Like we're going to have these team bonding experiences. Well, go clean out the cages at the SPCA. There's nothing more bonding with your team.
No, it's a phenomenal team building experience.
Right. So there's real tangible results that come from that.
Yeah. It's way better than the trust fall.
Or the ropes course.
Yeah, the ropes course.
All those
my
things
God.
that corporations would send people off to do. And at the end of the day, you feel good about it.
It does. It provides like a level of joy that you wouldn't get just from like a
Don't you think that's hard to quantify? I mean, but I think it's real. I mean, you can feel it.
God, well, absolutely, you can feel it. It's really, I think it is hard to quantify. It's something worth pondering to figure it out, because if there's a way that we can measure it, it would be, obviously there's engagement studies and things like that, but even the ability to get an engagement study or the tactic to get it is unengaging. If you think about it, it's like, true. Oh my God, answer this survey. No. It's like, stop. I hate these.
That's like,
is this like anonymous? Are they going to be reading my answers? Like, it's like the worst thing ever.
It goes up there with the IT service desk, right? It's like, don't make me do that.
Oh my God. Well, let's talk about some community involvement for a second, because obviously you've got a beautiful ring there.
Thank you.
Tell us about what you've got there.
So that is what is now the ReliQuest Bowl. I've been on that board for about 24, 25 years. And it was the Outback Bowl previously until this year. We got a new local title sponsor we're thrilled with in ReliQuest. But that's been kind of part of my journey, to be honest with you, here in Tampa Bay.
So it seems like a lot of the community things that you're involved with do have something to do with sports.
They do. And my point of view, whether it's the Tampa Bay Sports Commission, the Outback Bowl / ReliQuest Bowl, we have such a reliance on tourism in this community that we need a thriving tourism business in order for us to have a healthy business community. And so my criteria was I wanted to do things I liked, but were also good for the community. And certainly sports and sports marketing, sports tourism is pretty high up there for me. And it hit all the criteria.
And so we're getting in the Frozen Four here. You're also involved in the Tampa Bay Sports Commission.
Correct. That's a big event. I mean, Cord, did you ever think we'd have 3 Frozen Fours here in 15 years? Like hockey, college hockey tournaments?
I never thought, I was never a fan of hockey until I moved to Tampa, like one of the, the warmest state in the maybe Hawaii's warmer. But anyhow, I was never a hockey fan until I really started following the Lightning. And now, it is by far my favorite sport.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you think of the South as being football territory, right? And we still are. But I think the combination of not only
Somewhere around like Gainesville, the South, like stops, and like
yeah, that's true.
we become Miami. But,
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, like you're right. Like the SEC is bigger than the NFL in
Right.
the South of the SEC football is way bigger than the NFL in the South. But
they've created such an experience
Yeah.
going to a Lightning game. I mean, even if you're not a hockey fan, it's an incredible experience.
it's fantastic. It's the most fun sporting event I've ever been to, and it seems like it's always a quality product.
Even like just the customer service component of it, they get it. They really get it.
They do. They absolutely get it. So you just mentioned like you are passionate around sports. So you found community involved things. Like, so how do you get involved? Like if somebody's watching this, how do they get involved in things like what you've gotten involved in? How do you open those doors?
Well, I think first is you get in your car and you go to the events, because there's a vetting process, right? At least in my mind, there always was. And I would go to 15 to 20 a year and, sit back and go, well, I enjoyed that one. I didn't like that one. Nobody showed up for this one. To me, it's hang around and help. At the end of the day, hang around and help. And, don't be the person who just shows up and says, hey, I attended this. Look at me on social media. I bought a $25 ticket and I showed up. Truly support. If you buy into it, if you think the cause is a good cause, truly support. The organizations, there are so many great nonprofits in the Tampa Bay area. All of them can use help. And so find your unique value prop and apply it to that organization.
Well, let's talk about that because the normal front door for a stadium is the little turnstile thing, right?
Right.
But you're talking about specifically like boards and commissions.
Right.
So how does someone approach an organization like that and like let them know that like, hey, I want to volunteer, I want to help. Like, give me something to do. I'm happy to pick up the ball here.
Yeah, no, it's literally that. You'd be surprised how many people we get involved in our organizations that it is an email. Hey, I'm available. I just connected a person I know who's in the IT space with the Ryan Neese Foundation. He literally sent me an email and said, I like what you guys are doing. How can I help? So they got together, had coffee. He's going to be a student mentor for him.
Isn't it amazing that one little skill of like soliciting yourself a little bit can open doors for you? If you sit back and wait for people to invite you, it'll never happen.
It won't.
It'll never ever happen. So, and it's one of those things where you have to sort of psych your mind into thinking about like, wow, these people are doing a good job. I bet they need help.
They all do.
And so then if you can think about it and go, wow, that group might need some more help. They've got a big operation there. Raise your hand. Introduce yourself. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Simple.
You have to keep going through the turnstile again and enjoying the event instead.
Right.
So, like,
it is literally that simple.
Yeah.
And I think, Cord, the other thing is like, I don't think people realize, offer what you have. Like nobody's sitting back and saying, you got to come in with a $50,000 check or whatever. Offer your time. All these charities. I mean, you mentioned the Tampa Bay Sports Commission. Every event we have, we are asking for volunteers, and so there's always an opportunity. And I think people get kind of hung up on it's this big organization. Well, it's a big organization made out of people just like the person who's volunteering.
Right.
And over time, kind of find your niche within that organization and pursue that path. There's a lot to it. I mean, I don't think that if somebody wants to get involved, I don't think the barriers to entry are high at all. I really don't.
I mean, it's worth trying and experimenting. Like test the fence, like in Jurassic Park. Like you might as well at least test the fence and see what the barriers truly are.
Right.
And if you're a decent human being, and you might know a couple people that are there, that might be why you're drawn to it. Is that people you already like and respect might already be getting a lot out of it or helping.
True. And you can do your research on Google. Find out where their next events are. Find out what their causes are. You can look up how much of the money goes to programs versus overhead. It's all right there at your fingertips nowadays.
Let's talk about some of that initiative for a second. So we interview a lot of CEOs on here Many times the CEOs we interview are founders.
Right.
Sometimes those people have made their way up. Like you mentioned, navigating your way through the organizational structure. You are a CEO that worked their way up and
Right.
became a succession plan. Tell us a little bit about that and about how to navigate some of those corporate politics and things like that. Give us some of that advice.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is, any organization that is founded by its nature, the founders are the personality of the company.
Sure.
And so it becomes kind of driven by that person's skill set. It becomes driven by that person's personality. And I think each business, when they reach, whether they want to have a liquidity event or they want the business to go to the next level, you really, that happens for one of three reasons. They either want to monetize their investment, and I found that one to be the least, or they don't have a succession plan, or third, they want to see capital infused into their company and see it become all that it can be. So it's a little different on which one of those paths, but you certainly have to bring kind of that infrastructure, keep what's positive that got you where you are today, and then really develop out for what's the next short-term, long-term plan. So it may, in some cases, be a 90-degree turn from what you were doing. It's usually more gradual. Mm-hmm. But you also have to recognize that you're coming into a situation where there's a legacy there, and you want to protect that legacy.
Well, I think you hit on a really, really important part too. If you're going into an organization where you're not the boss,
Right.
the boss has in mind what he or she is looking to do. Like they have a vision about how they see the rest of their life unfolding, right? And so trying to understand what that is, that's a big deal, because if they see you as somebody who's going to help them eventually sell their business.
Right.
Or like if you were just transparent and honest, like, hey, what are you trying to do here? It's like, perfect. I'm going to make all of my decisions as, working for you to help enable that to happen. They're going to naturally want to give you more decisions.
Yeah, it's really critical that you're on the same page there.
Yeah.
And what that transition time frame will look like, and what do they want their next path to be.
Right.
Right. So you never want to walk in and go, hey, you're out the door. That's culture shock to an organization. But what you can do is be a pathway for them to get where they want to go, whether it's a liquidity event or retirement and enjoying the next phase of their life. I think you have to build up a lot of trust there.
Right.
And I think you also have to kind of get on the same page as to what's the next page. Because nobody wants to come in. When you turn over as a founder, and I've done about 11 M&A deals now, when you go through that process, whether you're a founder and you're bringing in a successor or you're selling your business, that's a really big event.
Huge.
I mean, imagine selling this, right? It would probably feel like a divorce in some ways, and it would be an emotional event.
100%. I mean, you're talking about something that somebody's given a tremendous amount of their life to.
Right. And so getting on the same page and being respectful of that event and what that means to that person, but then also making sure that whether there's earnouts or compensation issues, making sure that they're getting to that next pathway, right? Because it's never going to be helpful if that goes poorly. It's going to go poorly for the founder. It's going to go poorly for the successor. And unfortunately, then the employees get caught kind of in the middle.
Sure.
So I think a lot of conversations on the front side around what is the next phase, what's the time frame for it, and where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Like how can I help you get to where you want to go?
So how did you work your way up? How did you work your way up through an organization?
Well, on this one, I came from another company.
Okay, so you were hired in as an expert.
Yeah, so I was brought in as a successor. So
Okay.
that transition was starting. But I think the key to any movement up in an organization is where can I add value?
Yeah.
It's classic textbook kind of where can I add value? Where can I start to understand the financials? And I think that's one of the real components that a lot of up-and-comers miss is they don't understand the financial part of the business
Right.
and how they can add to that through their kind of day-to-day actions.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem with companies in general. I mean, a lot of companies, people don't know how their work impacts the
Right.
the
Regardless
P&L.
of what you're doing,
Right.
if the machine is
Right.
bleeding,
Right.
it may bleed out.
Right.
It has to be sustaining.
Right.
And so understanding whether or not what your trajectory is and how you can impact it is fundamental.
It really is. And
Yeah.
there's the concept of a team of teams, and you start kind of building these small, nimble teams that all kind of add up to the greater good. If people don't understand what their role is in that team, it falls apart really, really fast.
Yeah. So what's your style of building trust and communicating with your people?
I think transparency is everything. And I think that includes, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we'll fix the bad and the ugly. And I think there are times when it's bad news, but I think people ultimately want to know what's going on in the organization. And I'm a big fan of full transparency. If we had a bad month, we're going to all know we had a bad month. If we had a good month, we're going to all know we had a good month. And then I think it's celebrating the small successes. I think it's critical. It's pretty easy if all you're seeing is P&Ls and things like that. There's a million little steps that go into that.
Yeah.
right?
One of my favorite business books is The 1 Minute Manager.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like just catch people doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Wow,
Yeah.
you made a great decision there. Yeah, pat on the back. It's awesome.
How do you see that, though, playing out with kind of the new virtual workforce? Because a lot of that was
so hard.
management by walking around, right?
I mean, there's little things like turn your camera on.
Right.
Like actually look presentable,
right.
on a Zoom call. Make sure the lighting, this is your chance to add a layer of communication to interacting with either your teammates or your
Right.
clients. So don't leave, stuff on the feed, make sure you take advantage of that opportunity because it's really important that they feel understood. So
I think that's great advice.
I think that it's very difficult to do it remotely. It's very
do too.
difficult without some kind of very we talk about taking surveys, without some kind of management technology or something that is
Right.
holding people accountable. And then even that to me stifles creativity. I am the worst employee ever. That's why I had to start my own business because I would always rebel against systems like that, you
Right.
know? But that's why, I love coming into the office and being around the team. I feed off of it. It's just my personality.
I'm the exact same way.
Yeah.
Even during COVID, we didn't have employees there, but I went in every day just to have that feel.
Yeah.
It felt different to me.
Well, that's an important part of work-life balance too.
Right.
Being able to go, okay, what mode am I in at the moment? And of course, I got home at 11:30 last night working on a special project. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. We're always going to be navigating it.
Well, it's funny. We just did a time management training
Yeah.
in our office. And for the people who do work remote, there were certain tips that I would have never thought of. And things like they call them commute rituals. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what they were, but it's, all right, I'm going into my office to work. What's my commute ritual? Do I open the blinds? Do I light a candle? And then when my workday's over, what do I do to
you're right.
Put
a reset.
Yeah, to say, okay, the workday's over. Snuff out the candle, close the blinds or
Turn
whatever.
the radio down or whatnot, right?
It's just things I don't think we ever thought of 10 years ago.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we even though we're still animals, we still have, we still condition ourselves.
Right.
There still is understanding of what ways we can optimize our own behaviors and things like that. And I think those are really big things.
I do too.
Well, Tim, thank you for coming in. Where can we follow you? Where can we keep track of what you're up to?
Sure. LinkedIn, Tim Love. It's pretty straightforward. Alltrustinsurance.com. We are also on all of the socials under @AllTrustInsurance. We've got a lot of changes coming up. We'll be moving to your neighborhood. So if people are in the Sky Center, stop by and say hello.
That's good. We'll check out one of the great restaurants over there in the airport.
Right,
one
exactly.
of these days. So let
Jump
me know
on the tram.
Yeah, let me know when you want to grab a bite. We're only a block away from where you're going to be.
I love it.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, and we'll make sure to follow you there.
Well, thank you, Corda. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. And you can follow us anywhere where podcasts are found, on the Bakemore Pod social media feed, as well as the Law of Relevancy media feed. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.